I'm so excited that you're on the podcast. Krista Cain has joined us today because she is a death doula, and I wanted to educate my audience. And I even have clients that are really interested in this type of work. So, thank you, first of all, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
And can you explain to the audience, like, what is the death doula, the definition?
Yeah, so a death doula actually has a really broad definition and people practice it in a bunch of different ways, but it's a non-medical person who can be part of your end of life team, either in the planning stages, when you don't have any kind of life limiting diagnosis and you're just starting to think like, well, I guess I'm mortal, so is there anything I need to know about this? Um, all the way up until any kind of diagnosis during the dying time and also aftercare. Some of my clients I haven't gotten to work with until after they've passed. So it's a very broad time of life that we can work with people. But what we do is very distinct because it's non medical. So it's very much about the social emotional needs of people and helping coach them through education and hands on guidance through um, whatever the new normal is going to be in their life.
Yeah. So before we started recording too, you were saying you mostly are educator.
Far more, yeah, far more than for me. I mean, I'm sure that there are other people out there who do it more hands-on work, but I've been an educator for over 20 years. I started as a high school teacher. I moved into birth work, and then it was a very natural progression when I studied with end of life, to become an end of life doula, to just add that level of education on top. So education is my huge passion, and it's a deep honor when I get to serve families hands-on. Um, but also sometimes it's great to be able to just send that information out into the world and help people, put that in their own hands too.
Right.
Yeah.
So when would you say the majority of your clients find you, or like at what
Mm.
stage? Is it just all around, or?
It's moving actually, like right in these times. Like the shutdown, I think really gave a lot of people perspective and people were at home and seem to have done a lot of reflective work because birth and end of life clients have really shifted in that time. It used to be crisis points. A lot of times it was people I knew or birth clients would call me when a loved one had passed. Unexpected timing, either from overdoses or, by their own hands. Sometimes diagnoses that just traveled faster, like those timelines were shorter than people expected. And so I would get calls like, this has happened. And so someone would have already passed away. And then I would be called in to help um, dress people in burial shrouds, making shrouds for families, helping guide families through hands-on process in funeral homes or at home with ceremony or ritual that aligns with their own religious beliefs. Because that's the other thing, a lot of my clients have religious beliefs, and then they also have a nervous system. And so making space for them to walk with their pastors or their priests, and then giving them home care kind of rituals to do on their own. I don't know if I'm explaining it um, very, very well because it's such a broad kind of work. But yeah, so it used to be I mostly got calls after someone had passed. And we
Okay.
would either do hands on stuff or ritual things afterwards to help their nervous systems get used to that new normal.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because it is
Yeah,
true. I suffered a tragic loss, right? My husband, he passed away just 2 years ago.
I
And
saw that.
it like literally rips a huge piece of you out. Like
Yep.
you're left there with a giant freaking hole.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So the nervous system, who knew? Who knew? And then I like
Yeah.
all of the ritual stuff that you're talking about too, because I think that really helps people be in a more magical space and
Yeah.
honoring that. How did you, okay, I have a couple questions. So you're talking about
Mm.
birth clients. So you're a birth doula as well?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I've been doing birth classes for 10 years as well. So, yeah.
So you're at both spectrums. You're both ends of
Yeah.
life. or the beginning and the end.
Yeah, and I really like I'm gonna just draw something. I have my Post-its nearby. Who doesn't? Um, people a lot of times are like, "Oh, you work in birth and you work in death," like both ends. But no, right? Like we've got birth and then we live our lives and then we have our death. It's not that far apart in the lived experience. The way, I mean, that's a funky little circle,
Yeah.
but
So
our
for the
lives are
people,
not linear. They're
right.
cyclical.
Okay. So
And
the
it's
people that can't see you, she was drawing a straight line, like a starting point of birth and then a straight line to death. And then she's like, no, it's not like that. She's drawing birth is at the top of the circle, and then it's a huge circle of living, and then death like is almost touching the birth.
yeah,
So it's
that's my experience of it. And I know a lot of birth and death workers who see it the same way. There are a lot of people who do both because you're touching the divine in both.
beautiful. So with your
Yeah.
birth clients, these people obviously must find you obviously before the birth.
Yes.
So are you there like actually like as a midwife then, or
No, as a doula, also non-medical. So midwives are either apprenticed in or medically trained. Most of the midwives in my town at this point are nurse midwives, so they have multiple advanced degrees. But I honestly, most of the births that I go to are at the hospital,
okay.
the vast majority. So they're attended by midwives in the hospital or physicians.
Right. Can you share
Yeah.
more about how you said it's you're touching the divine?
Yeah. People are starting to realize with birth and with death that these are not just regular old everyday experiences and they aren't something that we have to be afraid of. My clients that I've noticed anyway, um, really seem to understand that it's big, it's mysterious, you don't get to do it every single day, and it means a lot. And so that's when I get brought in is when people are like, we know it's big. We know it'll have an impact on us and the circles of people around us because of how we manage the experience for ourselves. What do we need to know? And so I teach education classes and definitely also attend births as a doula. So I'm there in the room with their medical team, working as part of the team, helping make sure that I always like to tell my clients, I want everyone in the room at your baby's birth, I want their life to have been made richer because they were there for this human entering this world.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you say education, you literally teach classes?
Yeah. Lamaze.
Okay.
For birth, yeah, and end of life, I do my own brand, of workshops. Yeah, helping people have conversations. A lot of my work now so it started I was starting to say that before, a lot was like aftercare after someone had passed, and it's much more working towards the before time at this point, where people are seeking me out for one-on-one coaching. I've gotten a diagnosis, my partner's gotten a diagnosis, or someone in my circle has gotten a diagnosis. How do I move forward knowing what I know while remaining in the present? How do we prepare without projecting ourselves into the future and being in this moment right here, right now, as buoyant as we can be?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm
So
doing a lot more coaching.
I love that. I think it's something
Yeah.
that's needed, and like I think more and more people are hearing about this type of work.
Hmm.
How did you end up getting into this?
Yeah, I had a couple significant losses in my life. I think a very normal way to get into this is that you're called into it by your own life path. There were two significant women in my life. One was my grandmother, and one was my goddaughter, and they were 10 years apart in their passings, and I got to be part of that in different ways. So with my grandmother, I was in my 20s. I went and lived with her. She had gotten the diagnosis. She had stage 4 lung cancer. And so I got to live with her while she was seeking treatment. She wanted to do some life extending treatment and help her prepare to sell her house and that kind of stuff and move in with other family. And with my goddaughter, she also she had a brain tumor and had an extended hospital stay that culminated in her dying there in the hospital. And I didn't get to see her. She was in a different state. And but supporting my best friends and going there to be on site. We were actually meant to be there on a Sunday, and she passed on the Thursday before. So yeah, walking that way with people. I remember with my goddaughter, and her parents have asked that I leave her name out of things, so
That's
I'm not
fine.
going to name her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have said it's okay for me to share this story.
The story.
Yeah, um, we had 5 days with her, at the funeral home, and we would have play dates, and a group of women gathered together to anoint her body. I spent a lot of time there too, either on my own or with my kids. And I remember one of the funeral directors stopped me on my way out one day, and he said, "I wish everyone could do it this way. You guys are really making the most of this time." And it was such a vote of confidence, and he was really seeing what we as a community were doing to help prepare our kids for the life that would be afterwards, allowing the kids and welcoming the kids into that space in a hands-on way where they weren't wronged for wanting to explore their beautiful friend or sibling, and see what those changes were that were unfolding within her body as time was going on. And I thought, this is really powerful. And I got trained a short time after that officially as a death doula, so I could help others in my community.
Wow. That's a beautiful story. So, can you share? I know like way back when people would spent a lot more time and would do more ritualistic things. Why do you think we steered away from that?
Honestly, there's a really great author, and I had read him, and he's from Michigan as well. When I was studying abroad, and a friend of mine told me about this author. His name is Thomas Lynch, and he wrote a book called The Undertaking, and it's a really great, very short book. And he's hilarious. And I don't know anybody in the death world who isn't really funny, actually. um, and he likens the advent of funerals being handled by funeral homes. He doesn't liken it, but he like pairs it together with the advent of flush toilets. Like we started taking these things and like putting them away, taking them out of sight. We're not going and actually dealing in a hands-on way with our own bodily secretions or whatever. And we're not doing that with our people when they die either. And it just so happened in the same time frame that those kind of came onto the scene. I think that sometimes those traditions start as a way of people honoring their loved ones. Like economically, if I can do a lot of, um, if I can choose a beautiful casket, if I can buy a beautiful outfit, if I can get a gorgeous spray of flowers, that this is a public demonstration of my love. Um, and funeral homes offer a lot of great services that help people express their feelings and those connections. And there are ways that we can do it at home, and there are ways we can do it as a hybrid. You can have a funeral at a funeral home. You can be embalmed. You can be cremated. You can have a green burial. None of these things make it impossible for your loved ones to have ceremony for themselves. And, like I know this because in my own life, one of my other grandmothers passed away, and I went to the family funeral at her church. And afterwards, I was like, I'm going to go to the river, and I'm going to go down there and have a moment for my own self and be with nature and be with the memory of my grandmother and do what comes to me. So it's not like you have to choose. You don't have to, I'm not a purist. I feel like we can choose lots of paths all at once. We don't have to, you know, whoosh our loved ones away. But if we do, we don't have to make ourselves wrong because of it. So if there's
No.
anyone here who's listening and found out after the fact that in most states you can keep a person who's passed away in your home for hours, as long as there's no like crime, right? Um, you have a lot more time. People often will have a lot of grief when they learn that there are options around end of life. Our habit is to make a phone call, someone come and pick up our loved one's body, take them away, and then we're just in this busy cycle of planning and prepping and all this financial commitments and agreements and that kind of stuff. If that has been your path, understand that you can do this yourself today. You can restory these things in your own nervous system. So just because we have this current cultural heritage of doing things one way, and even if we've done them that way ourselves with our loved ones, our personal truths, our personal rituals, whatever is meaningful for us is always available for us. We're always able to do a do-over.
That's true. You can have a ritual now, because everything you said, I think that's
Absolutely.
exactly what happened when my husband passed away. It was like, oh, okay, I like go into trauma mode, right? It's like, okay,
Mm.
I'm supposed to call these hospice people. They've got to come pick him up. Oh my God. I've got to call his parents. Oh my God, and
It's
then
so busy.
right into now what's the next step? Oh my gosh, he wants to wear this. I better buy his outfit today. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because he knew he was
Yeah.
gonna die. So he was buried in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. That's what he wanted. So
Beautiful.
right. So but yeah, like you're saying, I didn't do a ritual, for him. And he was there for hours, but I was like, I didn't want to really look. really look. But because they were so behind at the time on picking people up, apparently.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going back, because you could still feel the feeling, good Lord. And you could still do that type of ritual. And I love how you're saying it for the nervous system. Can you share a little bit more about the nervous system work that you do?
Well, can I tell you a story to kind of
Sure.
explain it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We
And
love
this
stories.
again,
That helps us understand. Yes.
it's a story again that's blessed by the family to share. So I just like to preface those kinds of things where there are boundaries and where there's space for that. I got to help um, prepare and enshroud an elder in my community whose wife survived him. And she had dementia or some sort of memory thing where she had a pretty short loop. She was such a sweetheart, and always reminded me of Dory. Do you remember the movie Finding Nemo?
Yes.
And the little blue fish named Dory?
Yes. And she
And
would
she
keep
was,
forgetting stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and just like, but she was so cheerful and just such a pleasant, presence everywhere, but just like kind of this really quick loop. Well, this woman, um, it was her first time in her 90s ever anointing a body, and so the family invited me in. I made a shroud for the family to use, and then joined them for some hands-on work at the funeral home to prepare his body for burial. And this woman who, has this very, very short loop on any given day was able to drop in with us. We dropped in with song and with prayer of their own tradition. I don't presume to know more than people when they have spiritual practice. We just make space and invite that in. So it's not like I'm coming in and doing anything. I'm just helping people find their voice. And then we went to the work of hands-on anointing, and I guided them through some thoughts and invited them to, like be thoughtful in the way that they were doing it. That would kind of be a stroll down memory lane for them. And at first, of course, like the pace is like, okay, we go from the head to the cheeks, to the chin, or to the heart space, and it's like people kind of like start going through the list. And then over time, each of the people just starts finding their own pace. And even his wife, who usually has this really brief um, cycle that she's on, really slowed down. And I think that she was able to drop through into a deeper space within herself because about 45 minutes in, I had one of my kids with me. I wasn't planning on leading that ritual that day because the person that one of the kids actually had trained as a death doula with me. We had trained together. But when I arrived, she was in the blast zone. And I was like, I don't think you need to be leading this. I would love to do this for you if you would let me. And they did. but I had my kid with me and she was 6 at the time. She'd been making paper airplanes with the funeral director and they'd been having a great time. But she peeked her head around the corner and she said, "Can I come in and can I join you?" And so I asked his wife, "What do you think?" And she said, "That would be okay." And she said, "But I want to make sure she knows how to do this." And so this woman who had this very brief circle that she would just, go in, she's the one who taught my own child how to anoint a body. And she did it for a sustained period of over 20 minutes, walking my child through this process. Ceremony affects people on levels that we cannot even understand. But it makes people feel safe. And that's a vagus nervous system kind of response. When we feel safe to surrender in a very hard situation, we're tapping into those spaces in ourself. And I make no claims, but I thought it was an incredible miracle, to be honest, that she was able to do for my child what I had just done with her. These kinds of rituals, the types of things that we tap into when we follow our intuition or a trusted guide, are memories, our blood memories. These are our actual heritage, in addition to the offerings of our spiritual paths that might include a church or any other organization. But our bodies know how to grieve. Our bodies know how to tend to our dead. Our bodies know how to do this stuff. It's just creating enough of a pause and enough of a container for people to feel safe enough to go inside and find those pieces of themselves.
Man, is that beautiful or what? I love how you're talking about that, the nervous system and the vagus nerve. Because if we don't tend to that, then I think we're constantly in that trauma response.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with a trauma response. I think it gets a real bad rap, but fuck, we can't get out of it. Like, we're not wrong for being in a trauma response for any length of time, but there is relief in finding moments where we're free from it, and sometimes even those moments stretching out to becoming habitual.
Um,
Again, a lot of the work that I do, I find so much grief when people are like, "Wow, I didn't have to carry this long." And I would be so sad to say anything that would make someone feel bad about the path that they've had. So I just want to be really clear about that.
no, I love it. I think everybody is having it's all our experience. And when we hear about there's a possibility to do our experience in a different way or to read or to redo our experience so that we have better memories. Yeah, there's no wrong way. I remember when my mom was in the hospital dying and a priest or somebody, a pastor, I don't know, came and he was like, "Can I pray for your mom?" And me and my daughter and my mom were in there and she was conscious and everything still. And we're like, "Of course you can."
Mhm.
There he's like, "What religion are you?" We were like, "We're not. We don't have one." And he said, "You know, all religions are like a bicycle wheel. All the spokes go to the same direction." And I was like, "I love that. We're
I love it
all on our
too.
same journey on the way home. We just take a different approach." So
Yeah.
yeah. So one of my clients is a hospice nurse.
Mm.
And so she's wanting to get out of that field because it's wearing on her. And she's also
Mm.
very intuitive and stuff. And so that's also why I wanted to talk to you because I'm like, this would be a fantastic avenue for her to look into. Um, because she is dealing with death. And a lot of what she does do is comforting the clients that she goes to see. It's a lot of, you know, support work.
Yeah. Well, and a doula has a different role than a hospice worker, very much so. Um, and yeah, she might love it. A lot of times, when I go to bedsides, a lot of times I'll like, not a lot of times, every time I walk around my house and I just like say to my objects, like, who wants to come with me? And I remember I was heading to one and paintbrushes wanted to come. And I'm like, it's always weird, but it always works. And And the hospice nurse that came, because of course they need to mark time of death, that kind of stuff. So somebody needs to come back on site, even though if the family has been tending to their loved one alone in the home. The hospice nurse was there, and I brought out paintbrushes and just invited the family to write, just with dry paintbrushes, just to write blessings onto the loved one's body. And anything that she had given them to write those messages onto their own skin, just to affirm that that connection, that those gifts are still alive, are still vibrant, are still accessible. And the hospice nurse had recently lost her own father. He had recently passed. And she said, I didn't even know we could do this. And I said, it's not too late. And I said, why don't you take this? Would you like to take this paintbrush home? And would you like to do this at home for your own self and for your own father? You still can. There is plenty of time. And she took that, because sometimes the witnessing, the medical role is very specific and prescribed. But my role is really vast and dynamic, um, and quiet and powerful, and sometimes laughter, and sometimes song, and sometimes watching movies with people that they choose. It's such a different role than a nurse, but I love working with hospice workers. I find it a great pairing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And she doesn't have to leave her career either. It's honestly, just as a profession, death doula work is very hard to make ends meet. And so if she needs to support herself financially, I would suggest doing some ritual for herself, or finding a coach, or finding somebody to help her stay buoyant, and like, whatever. For anyone, there is there's the path where you leave the path, and there's the path where you pause.
Ooh.
And yeah, and I think I'm really into a quitting phase right now. But I've quit some things that I'm like, "Oh, if I had accessed help better, I probably could have continued doing that and been okay and buoyant and had the resources, but I didn't know how to ask for help." Even me, even though this is what I do, because when it's our thing, we need each other. And so, it's a very dreamy kind of work to do, but financially, it is not easy to sustain. So I just like that to be very clear.
Right. I think that's with any entrepreneur journey. I
Yeah,
literally just recorded a whole other podcast with somebody just now who
you did.
is an entrepreneur, all around entrepreneur, but decided to get a job driving a freaking limo for a while on top of that, So
Yeah.
I mean, it's and on that same podcast I shared with her how I took a good year off, and I was making $10,000 months before my husband died. $10,000 to $13,000 months consistently. It was amazing. And then taking
Mhm.
all the time off and then coming back, it's like the entrepreneurship, ship does not go straight.
No, no, it does not. It really, really doesn't. So, yeah. And I mean, of course, you and I, you can connect your friend with me if they wanted to talk more about it.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
just the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why else I wanted, because I know there's so many people um that listen to this podcast that are like, "Oh, I want to help with death, or I want to help with birth." Um, and you're doing it. And I think it's amazing. And just listening to you is so magical. You've got to be rich from all these experiences.
Absolutely. And I mean, it does pay well when people work with me, but it's not everybody who is ready to say yes to this kind of thing. And that's where education comes in. I am able to make a more consistent income through the educational piece,
Hmm.
and also have a better quality of life. On call work is um, a big commitment. And I actually, like I was just saying, I'm in a quitting phase. I just went to my last known birth doula birth last month, because for 10 years I've been on call, for birth and for death. And it has really impacted my ability to be present in my own life, which I think maybe was something I was looking for a minute. But I'm like, okay, I'm in a new phase and I have different aspirations right now. So I've needed to stop taking on-call clients, but continue with my education. And I also am launching a doula training course, um, because I have this bundle of knowledge that I carry because of my experiences, and I want to be able to pass that on and enrich the other doulas in my world, which is, because everything's online now, it's anyone in the world who wants to access this kind of stuff, and study from me, not how to be a doula, but how to thrive as a doula, how to even thriving feels like wrong. My curriculum is called Getting Shit Done. And it teaches doulas how to move from a full martyring kind of service to how to facilitate really great relationships with everybody in the room so that your advocacy is less fraught and less fighty, so that your clients are more resilient, so that you yourself are able to tap into self-care more consistently. Kind of just how to be well while doing good.
Ooh, I like that. Be well by doing good.
Yeah.
I like
I'm gonna
that.
write that down too. That just came out of my mouth.
No, I love that. And when you're in a certain industry, it's great to tap into all the sides of it, especially when
Yeah,
you're an entrepreneur, because then you have these multiple streams of income coming in. And
it's so
helping
true.
people. So like for me on the flip side, like, because I like to tell stories too. So for me, like I could do readings, but I'd rather teach you how to do readings. I'd rather teach
Hmm.
somebody else how to do it so that then now they have the skill set. Um, instead of me exchanging that hour for the dollar amount or whatever. I'd rather be like,
Right.
let me show you how to do it. So here's my class, you know?
Mm,
Yeah. So I like that
yeah.
you're touching all the different areas of the doula stuff. Yeah.
And sometimes people just want stuff done. And so it's like decision fatigue is a real thing. Community support is a real thing. That's another thing that I've like started kind of reimagining because I have these big ideals like everyone should know all these things for themselves. And people are like, I'm just really tired. Can you tell me the answers?
Right.
And it's like, oh, I also can do that. Like, I can help you with that piece as well. Very practical, very simple, very accessible, like right this second. A little
Yeah.
plug and play, plus some tapping in, a good combo of both.
I love it. So now you said, so I know you live in Traverse City, Michigan, right?
Mm, I do. Yeah.
And I have lots of Michigan people listening onto the
Yeah.
podcast because I lived there for a while.
Hello.
So yeah, so hi. And then what about all the other people? Do you have a website now that you're saying that you're creating this online course and stuff?
Everything's going to be pointed from my website to whatever is born next. So Sweetwater Doula, and doula is doula. So Sweetwater Doula, or you can look up Krista Cain doula. I think that usually will get you to me. Yeah, and whatever I make next, I'll just point the point the technology in the right direction, because it's getting born at this minute, like right now. I've
You're
got a gorgeous
birthing,
team.
you're birthing a doula thing.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful team working with me, to create that final offering, what it looks like. I've got the content and they're handling all the other stuff because I didn't want somebody to teach me how to do a website. I was like, if I just tell you, can you do it? Can you do the marketing? Like, oh, thank God for circles of people.
Yes, ma'am. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. Thank goodness for like my assistant, or like if you just ask, there'll be something will come out of the woodwork. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
well, I can't thank you enough for blessing the podcast with your beautiful energy today. You have this gorgeous energy that I would want you involved in the death doula section because you're so calm and it's like you're exactly perfect for being a death doula.
Well, when people work with me, they get this version of me. And
Yeah.
when they are friends with me, like that's part of what it is. I want to just say that too. if you are doing this work or thinking about doing this work, a big part of this work is being a chameleon. And knowing that these are people's peak life experiences and bringing our own lived experiences and our own wisdom and to it, but always putting those people in direct contact with their own source. So before we sign off, can I actually give a technique for how I do this?
Yes, please.
Okay. So when I'm in a room, a birth or a death, and there's, for example, big energy coming up that's reminding me of something in my own life, or that's fluttering something inside of me, is stirring something up that feels a little disruptive, where my ego is getting a little like zing. I imagine the flow of this experience, and I always place my clients in the river, in the flow. And any of these little interpersonal egoic little rubs that can happen between people, those are like rocks that create turbulence on the waters. And so when I notice myself starting to get activated or triggered or reminded or egoic or whatever, sometimes it's what's called for, whatever, there's a balance. Sometimes we do need to step in as our full selves, but a lot of the time it doesn't belong in that room. And so I imagine the river flowing, and then I imagine a little side creek, and I have my stuff flow out the side creek and into a reservoir that's physically in my mind's eye behind me. And I just say that you're very important, and I will work with you and we will talk, just not right now. And I keep that space in between myself and my clients energetically clear, so that when they look at me, they see a reflection of their own experience. And I know that it works because at another end of life experience, I was with a friend who called me to be with her family when a loved one passed away. And she knows me, and I have a really big personality, and we have good laughs and whatever. And I'm also a mom of 3 young kids, and I had one clean dress, and it was bright yellow. So I wore this bright yellow dress to this family's home at an end of life experience. And she was like, "That dress was so yellow." And she's like, "But honestly, Krista, there were times when something would be happening in the room and I would think, I wish Krista were here. And I would look around and I wouldn't see you." She said, "The way that you can disappear is incredible." She said, "I had no idea you could do this." Especially because she's a personal good friend of mine, and we know each other in so many ways. But she said, "I would look around for you and I couldn't see you. And then I would look again and I would see you were actually there, but you were making yourself so part of the scene. You didn't stand out." And that is part of the magic that we give when we set these containers and we hold these containers, is knowing how to walk in our own selves in a way, um, where we can put ourselves to the side for a minute
Yeah.
so that these people's experiences can shine.
Yeah. And I love how you honored your feelings. It was like, okay, you're important. We're going to talk later.
Yeah,
We're gonna we're
absolutely.
gonna sit
Because
with
that
that
stuff
later and
comes
be
up
like,
for everybody.
what came up for me in there? Yeah.
I've texted people like, "I need you to pray for me right now." Like, I don't need to give details. I have my trusted folks where I'm like, I'm in it and I need support. Thank you.
Yeah.
So making sure we've got those circles of support for ourselves is also another really good way to be well in this kind of work.
Hmm. Love it.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all the goodness.
Thank you. It's really nice to see your face. I remember meeting you years ago, but it's been quite some time.
I was going to say, I think I met you in real
Yeah,
life. Yeah.
we did, but it's been, 5 lifetimes ago. Everything has changed so much, of course, with your partner passing, but also with everything in the world. Just seems like a time warp.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yay.
All right. Well, thanks, Brandoline. It's great.